For decades, whispers have drifted through the forests, ravines, and national parks of Ohio, stories of a towering figure moving silently between the trees, watching travelers from the shadows. These encounters, once dismissed as campfire tales, have grown too numerous, too consistent, and too emotional to ignore. Rangers, hunters, families, and hikers describe the same unsettling details: heavy footsteps pacing them at night, rhythmic knocks echoing across valleys, and glowing eyes appearing between pines just as daylight fades. What once seemed like isolated folklore now forms a chilling pattern across the entire region. Ohio's landscape is uniquely suited for something enormous to remain hidden. Dense forests stretch across the state, connecting national parks, abandoned mining lands, historic trails, and remote wilderness areas. These vast, shadowed corridors create pathways where a creature of immense size could move unseen for miles. Many witnesses insist they felt the creature before they ever saw it: an oppressive weight in the air, a sudden silence in the forest, or the unmistakable sensation of being watched by something intelligent. The land itself seems to hold its breath whenever the creature draws near. As I traveled through the state collecting testimonies, I realized that these encounters share the same tone: each witness felt they had stepped into someone else's territory. People describe the creature not as a wandering beast, but as a guardian, dominant, silent, and aware of every movement within its domain. Some say it appears only when humans stray too close to hidden ravines or ancient paths. Others believe it patrols its land deliberately, enforcing boundaries with a mixture of curiosity and quiet intimidation. Whatever the truth, its presence is unmistakable. Many of the encounters begin with subtle signs: a musky, earthy smell drifting through the air, branches snapping high above human reach, or a deep vocalization that echoes across ridges. Witnesses often report these signs moments before they realize they're not alone. When the creature finally steps into view, even for a second, its height, broad shoulders, and upright stance leave no doubt that they are staring at something far beyond any known species. The fear described is primal, but so is the awe. Despite its size, the creature moves with a silent precision that defies explanation. Hikers report hearing only a single crack of a branch before seeing the creature vanish into the trees. Hunters describe feeling its presence long before they see its silhouette. Families camping deep in the forest wake to find massive footprints circling their tents. These patterns reveal a being capable of navigating rugged terrain with ease, appearing and disappearing as though it understands how to avoid detection. It thrives in silence, an invisible ruler of the night. But perhaps the most disturbing detail across all these stories is the creature's intelligence. It observes, evaluates, and seems to make deliberate decisions about how close it will come. Witnesses describe its gaze as focused, aware, and almost calculating. It reacts not just to movement, but to emotion, remaining distant when people stay calm, and becoming louder or more assertive when humans panic or intrude too deeply. This level of awareness suggests a creature that has adapted over generations to coexist with humans while remaining largely unseen. This collection of testimonies, sightings, and encounters spans Ohio's most remote regions, from Hocking Hills to Tar Hollow, Salt Fork to Zaleski, and beyond. Each story reveals another piece of a puzzle that has haunted the state for generations. As you journey through these accounts, you'll step into dense forests, silent ravines, fog-covered ledges, and moonlit lakes, places where the boundary between myth and reality feels paper-thin. And the first time I heard reports of something massive stalking the trails of Hocking Hills, I assumed they were exaggerations, tall tales told around campfires by hikers seeking attention. But as I began interviewing witnesses, a chilling pattern formed. People described a towering figure with broad shoulders, glowing eyes, and a strange earthy smell that clung to the air long after it vanished. Every testimony seemed too detailed, too emotionally charged, to dismiss as fantasy. I sensed something ancient was watching these woods, something that didn't want to be found. And as I stepped deeper into Hocking Hills at dusk, I began to understand why people never forgot the sight. The first witness, a retired park ranger named Collins, trembled as he recounted what he saw near Old Man's Cave. He described hearing heavy footfalls pacing him from the tree line, keeping perfect rhythm with his steps. When he stopped, the footsteps stopped too. When he resumed walking, the unseen companion did the same. He knew the woods intimately, knew every deer trail and rocky slope, and insisted nothing native to Ohio moved with such intelligence. When he finally shone his flashlight into the dense pines, he saw eyes, large, amber eyes, hovering nearly 8 feet off the ground. And then everything went silent, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Another hiker, a young woman named Jenna, reported a similar encounter while camping alone near Ash Cave. She awoke to the sound of branches snapping and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Her tent zipper rattled gently, as though something outside was testing it. She didn't dare move. Moments later, a massive shadow passed by, blocking out the moonlight through the fabric. She said the presence felt purposeful, not accidental. As she lay frozen, the ground vibrated with the weight of something walking upright. Whatever patrolled her campsite wasn't a bear, and it wasn't human. It was something in between, something primal. Local native families have long told stories of a guardian who roams the cliffs, a creature of strength and caution who warns travelers away from dangerous places. One elder told me that the being is not hostile unless provoked, but it tests people, measuring their intentions with deep instinct. He claimed the creature's territory extends across ridges, waterfalls, and old logging routes. When I questioned him further, he simply smiled and said that the creature chooses who may see it, and who must be kept away. His calm confidence left me uneasy, as though he knew far more than he was willing to admit. A pair of brothers exploring Whispering Cave also claimed to have seen the creature. As they approached the cave's mouth, they noticed a musky odor, thick and earthy, unlike any animal scent they had ever smelled. One of the brothers shined his flashlight ahead and caught a fleeting glimpse of something tall stepping behind a pillar of stone. A hand, massive, long-fingered, and covered in coarse brown hair, briefly emerged into the light before retreating into darkness. The boys ran without looking back. Later, they insisted the hand looked more human than animal, but far too large to belong to any man. One of the most unsettling stories came from a group of campers who heard rhythmic knocking sounds on nearby trees. At first, they assumed it was another group communicating from a distance. But the pattern grew louder, more deliberate, echoing through the gorge with unnatural clarity. The knocking stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep exhale, like a creature sniffing the wind. Moments later, heavy footfalls circled their campsite. When a large stone was thrown into the firelight, landing just inches from their feet, they fled into the woods. None of them returned for their gear the next morning. A wildlife researcher named Dr. Holbrook told me he once followed a trail of huge footprints along Cedar Falls. Each print was nearly twice the size of a human foot and showed a mid-tarsal break typical of primates. The spacing between the tracks suggested a creature with a massive stride, far larger than any known species in the region. He collected plaster casts but never published his findings. "Some things," he said softly, "are better left alone." His expression carried fear, not curiosity, as though he had seen something that forever changed him. Another witness, a father hiking with his daughter, reported hearing strange whooping sounds echoing through the trees. The girl covered her ears and begged him to leave, saying she felt something angry watching them. As they hurried back to the trailhead, they heard a massive branch snap behind them. When the father turned, he saw a silhouette, broad, impossibly tall, standing between the trees. It didn't chase them, but it followed them with its eyes, observing their escape with calculated patience. The father never returned to Hocking Hills. Near Rock House, a real cave-like structure carved into sandstone cliffs, a group of college students witnessed something crouched inside the shadows. They described long limbs folded unnaturally, as though the creature was adjusting its shape to fit inside the hollow. One student used his phone's flashlight and caught a glimpse of a face, flat, wide, and framed by tangled hair. The eyes reflected the light with a predatory gleam. Before they could react, the figure retreated deeper into the cave, emitting a low growl that vibrated through their chests. Even more disturbing was the account of a photographer who set up a night vision camera near a remote ridge. When he reviewed the footage, he saw a massive figure walk past the lens, seemingly aware it was being filmed. The creature paused, turned its head toward the camera, and revealed eyes that glowed with unnatural intensity. The camera shook slightly, as if something brushed against it, before cutting out entirely. When he returned the next day, the camera was smashed, yet the memory card remained untouched, almost as if the creature wanted the footage to be found. Another ranger reported hearing strange chanting-like noises late at night near the Hemlock Bridge Trail. At first, he assumed it was people playing a prank. But the sounds were deep, resonant, and rhythmic in a way no human throat could produce. When he approached the source, Cuyahoga Valley is known for its peaceful trails, rolling hills, and beautiful waterfalls, but locals quietly warn that the deeper you venture, the more the forest begins to feel alive in ways that defy logic. As I began interviewing witnesses, I noticed something unusual. Nearly every encounter happened near abandoned farms, forgotten railroad tracks, or remote marshes. It was as if something massive preferred the edges where nature reclaimed what humans left behind. Several hikers mentioned hearing heavy breaths in fog-covered areas, even when no animals were nearby. The more stories I gathered, the clearer it became that something ancient roamed these hidden pockets of the park. One of the most unsettling encounters came from a cyclist who traveled the Ohio and Erie towpath trail early in the morning. He said he noticed a large, dark figure following him from the tree line, keeping pace silently despite his increasing speed. As the fog thinned, he saw glimpses of something tall and muscular, walking upright with long, deliberate strides. When he stopped to catch his breath, the figure also stopped, remaining partially hidden behind a cluster of trees. The cyclist felt a powerful instinct to leave immediately, sensing that whatever watched him wasn't merely curious. He rode away without looking back. A night fisherman reported an encounter near Indigo Lake. He was casting his line when he heard a strange knocking sound echo across the still water. At first, he thought it was a fallen tree shifting in the wind. Then the knocking changed rhythm, becoming unmistakably intentional. When he turned his flashlight toward the far bank, he saw two amber eyes reflecting back at him. The eyes blinked slowly, as though assessing him. As he backed away, a deep exhale carried across the lake, heavy and warm. He left his gear behind and didn't return until daylight. Another witness, a history enthusiast exploring an abandoned barn near Everett Road, claimed to have seen something duck inside the structure as he approached. Thinking it might be a trespasser, he stepped closer, but the air suddenly filled with the overwhelming scent of wet fur and earth. He shone his flashlight inside and saw a towering silhouette crouched behind an old hay rack. The figure shifted, revealing long arms and a massive torso. Before he could react, it rose to its full height, nearly brushing the rafters. The man ran so fast he tore his jacket on a nail. He refused to return to the barn afterward. A pair of teen hikers wandering near the ledge's overlook said they felt watched long before they saw anything unusual. As the sun began to set, they heard low vocalizations coming from the base of the rock formations, sounds too deep and resonant to be human. When they shined a light downward, they saw a massive shape move between the boulders with surprising agility. The creature paused at one point, placing a large hand on a rock, leaving behind an unmistakable print. When the teens inspected the area the next day, the print was still there, pressed deep into the mossy surface. One early morning jogger claimed he smelled an overpowering musky odor near the old railroad tracks, a scent so strong he thought a large animal had recently passed. As he continued down the trail, he heard heavy breathing behind him. When he turned, he saw a tall figure standing in the fading mist. The creature didn't approach, but it tilted its head slightly, as though trying to understand him. The jogger froze, unable to move. Only when a nearby train horn sounded did the figure retreat into the trees with astonishing speed, vanishing before the mist cleared. Another chilling event occurred near Kendall Lake when a family reported hearing strange whoops and whistles echoing through the trees. At first, they assumed it was another group communicating. But the sounds became louder, more coordinated, almost as if multiple voices were calling across the forest. When a large shadow moved behind their picnic area, they quickly packed up and left. As they drove away, they saw a tall, dark shape standing near the tree line, watching them with unwavering stillness. The family refused to camp in the park again. A photographer searching for wildlife near a marsh claimed to have witnessed something extraordinary. As he approached the water's edge, he saw a ripple spreading across the surface as though something enormous had waded through moments earlier. When he raised his camera, a dark figure rose from behind a cluster of reeds, towering above the vegetation. The creature stared at him for several seconds before slowly backing into the shadows. The photographer snapped one blurry image, but the fear he felt convinced him never to show it publicly. He said the creature moved with an intelligence that terrified him. Another ranger recounted hearing what sounded like deep huffing breaths near the Beaver Marsh boardwalk at dusk. When he shined his flashlight into the reeds, he saw the tall silhouette of something standing perfectly still, almost blending with the vegetation. The figure turned its head slowly, revealing eyes that reflected the beam with startling brightness. The ranger felt a sudden chill, sensing he had intruded on something's territory. When he stepped back, the creature mirrored his movement. Only when he retreated completely did it fade into the marsh. A mother and her son hiking near the ledge's trail said they experienced something they could not explain. They heard branches snapping behind them and felt the ground tremble slightly as if something heavy was approaching. When they turned, they saw a massive figure between the trees, partially hidden by brush. The creature didn't advance but seemed to sway slightly, like it was communicating through motion. The boy whispered that it didn't want them there. They left immediately, and the mother later said she felt an overwhelming sense of dread, paired with an odd feeling that the creature meant them no harm as long as they didn't venture closer. One of the most dramatic encounters came from a group of young adults exploring the park at night with headlamps. They heard guttural roars echoing from the forest, each louder than the last. When they pointed their lights toward a ridge, they saw a massive shape standing against the sky. The creature raised its arms and released another roar that shook the air. The group fled, convinced they had stumbled onto something territorial. They later admitted that whatever they saw was larger and more imposing than any animal native to Ohio. The deeper I investigated Cuyahoga Valley, the more it became clear that the creature, or creatures, living there were not random wanderers. They seemed to. Wayne National Forest covers 3 vast districts, each filled with dense woodland, hidden valleys, and winding trails that seem to change personality after sunset. Locals have whispered for decades that something enormous prowls these woods, something that walks upright, moves silently, and appears only to those who stray too far into the deep hollows. As I traveled through the forest, I noticed that areas rich with old mining history held the most sightings. Abandoned shafts, collapsed tunnels, and rusted equipment created an eerie atmosphere, as though the land itself had absorbed the fears of those who once worked there. The deeper I went, the more I sensed I wasn't alone. One of the earliest witnesses was an off-road rider exploring a remote path near the Athens district. He said he stopped his ATV to take a break and heard heavy footsteps approaching through the trees. At first, he assumed it was a deer or a stray hiker. But then the footsteps changed, slow, deliberate, and rhythmically spaced like those of a large biped. When he looked up, he saw a towering silhouette standing near the ridge, barely visible through the thick canopy. The figure didn't move, but its presence felt overpowering, as though it was studying him. He left the area without turning off his headlights again. Another chilling encounter came from a hunter tracking deer near the Ironton district. He had set up a tree stand before dawn, waiting for movement below. Just as the light began to rise, he heard a deep grunt that resonated through his chest. Moments later, something massive walked beneath his stand, its shoulders so broad that it brushed against low branches. He held his breath as the creature paused directly below him. He could see the top of its head, covered in thick, matted hair, and smell an earthy odor. When it finally moved away, he climbed down and abandoned the hunt altogether. A pair of researchers studying bat populations near an old mine reported hearing strange vocalizations echoing through the tunnels. They described the sounds as deep, resonant, and far too powerful to come from any known animal in the region. At one point, a large rock rolled out of the mine entrance, as if pushed by something inside. When they shined their lights into the darkness, they saw two glowing eyes reflecting back at them. Whatever stood inside the tunnel retreated slowly, almost silently, yet the presence it left behind chilled them long after. A family camping near the Arch Rock area experienced an encounter they could not explain. Late at night, the father heard what sounded like heavy breathing outside the tent. When he unzipped the flap slightly, he saw a massive shadow standing near the fire pit. The creature turned its head slowly, revealing faint reflections of amber eyes. The father quickly zipped the tent shut and told his family to remain silent. They listened as the creature circled their campsite, its footsteps shaking the ground lightly. Only when dawn approached did the presence fade into the forest. Two hikers exploring the Wildcat Hollow Trail had a close call they still talk about today. They were walking a narrow stretch when they heard sharp cracks of branches breaking behind them. When they turned, they saw a dark figure standing on the trail, easily 2 feet taller than any human. The creature took one step forward, and the hikers felt the vibration through the earth. Instead of fleeing, they slowly backed away, keeping their eyes on the figure. It didn't follow, but it watched with an intensity that left both men shaken for days. A retired geologist documented what he believed were territorial markers left by something enormous. He found large trees stripped of their bark at heights no known animal could reach. Strange rock stacks appeared near secluded clearings, each carefully balanced. One evening, while mapping a section of the forest, he heard a loud knocking sound that echoed across the valley. When he returned the next morning, he found a fresh print in the mud, long, wide, and deeply pressed. The print was gone within hours as rain washed it away, but the geologist never forgot the encounter. Several campers near Timber Ridge reported hearing rhythmic whooping sounds long after midnight. The echoes bounced through the valley, rising and falling in a haunting cadence. At one point, a response came from another ridge across the forest, as though two unseen giants were communicating. When the campers shined lights into the trees, they saw nothing, but the feeling of being surrounded grew overwhelming. They packed their tents in silence and left before sunrise, convinced they had intruded on something's territory. A young couple hiking near Lake Vesuvius had a terrifying experience when they encountered a strong, musky odor near the shoreline. Moments later, they heard something large splash into the water. When they turned, they saw a massive figure wading through the lake, its broad shoulders barely submerged. The creature moved with surprising grace, gliding through the water before stepping onto the opposite bank. It briefly turned its head, revealing a silhouette that was unmistakably not human. The couple ran until they reached their car, never looking back. One of the most mysterious encounters came from a botanist studying rare plant species near Big Bailey Run. While collecting samples, she noticed absolute silence. No birds, no insects, just a heavy stillness. Then she heard slow breathing behind her. When she turned, she saw a massive figure partially hidden among the trees. It didn't move, but she felt a wave of overwhelming dread wash over her. The creature held its ground, watching her closely. After several tense seconds, it stepped backward into the shadows, merging with the forest as though it had never been there. Another ranger told me about a chilling night near the Little Muskingum River. He was conducting a routine patrol when he heard something large splashing through the water. When he directed his spotlight toward the river, he saw a massive figure standing knee-deep, staring back at him. The creature didn't flee. Instead, it raised one arm slowly, as if signaling him to stop. The ranger froze, heart pounding. After a long moment, the creature turned away and walked upriver, moving with an eerie calmness that made the ranger question everything he knew about wildlife. The more stories I collected, the more apparent it became that whatever inhabited Wayne National Forest wasn't a mindless beast. It displayed awareness, territorial behavior, and even a kind of judgment, choosing when to reveal itself and when to remain hidden. Witnesses described fear, yes, but also an odd sense of being evaluated. As I left the forest after dusk, I felt the weight of that same unseen judgment following me. The air grew colder, the trees silent, and for a moment I sensed something enormous standing just beyond the edge of sight, watching, waiting, deciding. Salt Fork State Park is often called Ohio's Bigfoot capital, a place where dense forests and winding shorelines hide more than wildlife. As I began speaking with locals, I noticed a striking consistency in their descriptions: towering figures glimpsed near the lake, heavy breaths echoing through ravines, and strange vocalizations that carried across the water at dusk. Some residents insisted the creature had lived there long before the park existed, moving through ancient pathways carved into the land. The deeper I explored, the more I saw how easily something enormous could remain hidden in the park's sprawling 17,000 acres. One of the most memorable reports came from a fisherman who spent the night on a remote section of the lake. Around midnight, he heard heavy footsteps along the shoreline, pacing slowly as though following his boat's gentle drift. When he shined his spotlight toward the sound, the beam caught a massive silhouette standing just above the waterline. The figure took one step back into the trees, its eyes reflecting the light with a golden glow. The fisherman said the creature moved with purpose, not fear, as if it was accustomed to watching humans from the darkness. A family renting a cabin near the woods experienced a terrifying event one stormy night. During a break in the thunder, they heard loud knocks against the trees outside, followed by a deep guttural call that echoed across the hillside. The father grabbed a flashlight and peeked through the window, expecting to see a deer or perhaps a stray hiker seeking shelter. Instead, he saw a massive figure standing motionless beside the cabin path. The creature's posture was rigid, its head slightly tilted. When lightning illuminated the woods, it vanished between the trees without a sound. Two park employees conducting maintenance near the Stonehouse Trail reported seeing something that shook them to their core. They heard rustling in the brush and assumed it was a black bear. But when the figure emerged, it walked upright with a smooth, deliberate gait. The creature was covered in dark, thick hair and stood nearly as tall as the nearby trail sign. It paused as though evaluating them, then stepped back into the foliage. The employees swore the creature displayed intelligence in its movements, as though it understood that leaving quickly was the safest option for everyone involved. A kayaker exploring the quiet coves of Salt Fork Lake just before dawn encountered something unforgettable. As he glided through a misty inlet, he heard rhythmic splashing behind him. Turning around, he saw a massive figure wading through the shallow water, its silhouette towering above the reeds. The creature didn't chase him, instead, it watched as he paddled away, its posture calm yet profoundly unsettling. Even through the morning fog, he could make out broad shoulders and long arms swaying in the water. He said the encounter felt more like a warning than an attack. Another chilling account came from a group of teenagers hiking the Morgan's Knob area at dusk. They stood on a ridge overlooking the forest when one of them noticed a large shape moving between the trees below. At first, they thought it was just shadows. But then the figure stepped into a clearing, standing tall with unmistakable humanoid features. It raised its head, appearing to sniff the air. When one of the teens accidentally snapped a branch underfoot, the creature turned sharply toward them. They ran back to the trailhead without stopping to see if it followed. A bow hunter scouting near Sugar Tree Trail reported seeing massive footprints pressed deep into the mud. Each print measured nearly twice the length of his boot and showed clear toes and a distinct midfoot bend. As he examined them, he heard a low rumble coming from the thicket behind him. When he turned, he saw a dark figure step into view, partially obscured by leaves. The creature stood still for several seconds before slowly backing into the shadows. The hunter later admitted he had never felt such primal fear in his life. A woman walking her dog in a quiet wooded area near the golf course described a disturbing encounter. Her dog stopped suddenly, growling toward the trees. Moments later, something huge moved through the brush, snapping branches as if they were twigs. She caught a glimpse of a tall, broad figure shifting between the trees, its dark form blending seamlessly with the forest. The creature didn't approach, but its presence was overwhelming. Her dog tucked its tail and refused to move until she turned back toward the parking lot. A camper staying in the primitive section of the park said he was awakened by the sound of rocks clacking together near his campsite. When he stepped outside his tent, he saw a massive silhouette standing near the fire pit. The creature remained motionless, holding two large stones in its hands. After a few seconds, it threw one stone into the woods with incredible force. The sound was so loud it echoed across the entire campsite. The camper froze, realizing the act wasn't random, it was intentional, perhaps even communicative. Near the Eagle Point Trail, a birder claimed to have encountered something that left her shaken for weeks. While listening for early morning calls, she heard a sudden hush fall over the forest. Birds stopped singing, and the air grew dense. When she turned to adjust her binoculars, she saw a tall figure standing between two maple trees, its chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The creature watched her silently, making no effort to hide. She backed away slowly until she was out of sight. She later said its eyes were the most haunting part, deep, focused, and strangely intelligent. A group of campers near the beach area witnessed one of the most dramatic sightings. As they sat around a fire late at night, they heard a loud roar echo from the woods. It was unlike any animal call they had ever heard, deep, powerful, and resonant. When they turned their lights toward the sound, they saw a massive silhouette standing just beyond the tree line. The creature took a step forward, revealing its immense size. The campers fled to their vehicles and didn't return for the rest of the weekend. Salt Fork's vast hills, dense forests, and secluded trails offer both beauty and mystery. The stories I collected painted a picture of a creature that was not merely passing through but deeply rooted in the land, territorial, intelligent, and watchful. As I left the park long after sunset, the moonlit water shimmered. Mohican State Park is known for its breathtaking river gorge, towering hemlocks, and winding trails that draw thousands of visitors each year. But beneath the beauty lies a darker history whispered among rangers and longtime residents. They speak of a silent hunter, an enormous figure that appears without warning, leaving behind footprints, eerie vocalizations, and shattered branches high above human reach. As I walked deeper into the forest, I felt a heavy stillness settle around me. The woods seemed too quiet, as if every creature sensed the presence of something far more powerful lurking just beyond sight. One of the most disturbing accounts came from a kayaker on the Clear Fork River. He was paddling through a shaded bend when he saw a massive figure crouched near the bank, its dark shape partially obscured by fallen trees. When he drifted closer, the creature rose slowly, towering above the brush. He froze as the creature stared at him, its shoulders broad and still. After several tense seconds, it stepped backward into the forest, melting into shadow with unnatural ease. The kayaker said the water felt colder the moment it disappeared. A trail runner exploring the Lions Falls Trail early one morning heard rhythmic thuds echoing from deep within the gorge. At first, he thought it was someone chopping wood. But the sounds were too far apart, slow, powerful impacts that resonated through the canyon walls. When he reached a curve in the trail, he saw a dark silhouette towering against the morning light. The creature stood on a ledge, perfectly still, watching him from above. The runner backed away carefully, sensing that the creature was assessing him rather than preparing to flee. A ranger patrolling near the covered bridge encountered something that defied his training. He heard heavy splashes in the river and assumed a deer was crossing. But when he shined his flashlight toward the sound, he saw a massive figure wading through the water with long, deliberate strides. The creature's head turned toward him, eyes reflecting the beam with an unsettling glow. Instead of running, it continued moving downstream, its steps silent despite the depth of the water. The ranger was left speechless, unable to explain what he had seen. A pair of campers staying in a remote section of the park experienced a terrifying night when they heard rocks being thrown near their campsite. The stones were large, far too heavy for a human to toss so effortlessly. At first, they thought someone was playing a prank. But when they heard deep breathing and branches snapping nearby, they realized something enormous was circling them. The creature never entered the firelight but paced just beyond it, walking in slow, measured steps. They stayed awake until dawn, listening to its movements fade into the trees. Another hiker reported a chilling encounter along the Gorge Overlook Trail. She noticed an unusual quietness in the woods, which made her uneasy. Then she saw a large shadow pass between the trees, moving with surprising fluidity. When she stopped, she heard heavy breathing behind her. She turned slowly and saw a massive silhouette partially obscured by foliage. The creature didn't move, but she felt an overwhelming sense of being evaluated. She backed away until she could no longer see its shape, then hurried back to the trailhead. A photographer capturing sunrise near Pleasant Hill Lake saw something emerging from the mist that made him question his own senses. As the fog lifted, he noticed a massive figure standing knee-deep in the water. Its posture was straight, its head tilted as though listening. When the photographer raised his camera, the creature shifted slightly, causing the water around it to ripple. After a few moments, it stepped backward into the fog and vanished completely. The photographer left the area immediately, shaken by the experience. A group of friends hiking near the fire tower claimed they heard deep, resonant vocalizations that sounded nothing like any animal native to the region. The sounds were long, rising and falling in haunting waves. When they reached the tower's base, they heard a loud crack behind them. Turning around, they saw a tall figure standing between two trees, its silhouette unmistakable. The creature didn't attack, if anything, it seemed curious. But the intensity of its gaze sent the group running back toward safety. A man mountain biking along a remote section of trail encountered something he could not rationalize. As he pedaled through a quiet, dimly lit part of the forest, he felt the hairs on his arms rise. Moments later, he saw a massive shape keeping pace with him from the tree line. The creature matched his speed with unsettling precision. When he slowed, it slowed. When he stopped, it remained still. He turned his bike around and left the area as fast as he could, convinced that he had been stalked intentionally. A botanist working on a research project near the Clear Fork Gorge reported an encounter that left her shaken. While collecting samples, she heard loud snapping noises from the brush behind her. When she turned, she saw a massive figure stepping into the open. The creature's chest rose and fell slowly, its breath audible even from a distance. It didn't move closer, but its size and presence made the botanist freeze in fear. After several long seconds, the creature turned and walked into the woods with long, powerful strides. A family enjoying a picnic near the river experienced an eerie moment of silence when all the birds suddenly stopped calling. Their dog began growling, fixating on a dense section of trees. When the father approached the area cautiously, he saw a large figure standing just beyond the shadows. The creature appeared to be observing them, its posture calm yet unnerving. When he stepped back, the figure slowly shifted out of sight. The family packed up and left immediately, unable to shake the feeling that they had stumbled onto something's territory. The more witnesses I interviewed, the stronger the pattern became. Whatever roamed Mohican State Park wasn't simply passing through, it behaved like a dominant force of the land, moving with purpose and intelligence. It watched humans, studied them, and responded to their presence with clear boundaries. As I drove away from the park, the forest seemed Zaleski State Forest is one of Ohio's most remote and mysterious regions, a place where dense hardwoods, forgotten cemeteries, and abandoned coal towns create an atmosphere ripe for unsettling encounters. Locals often speak of strange sounds that echo through the hills, deep knocks, distant howls, and heavy footsteps that seem far too deliberate to belong to wildlife. As I began collecting testimonies, it became clear that Zaleski holds a long history of sightings involving towering figures moving silently between the trees. The deeper I ventured into its twisting trails, the more I sensed an ancient presence lingering just out of view. One of the earliest accounts came from a group of hunters who camped near the Moonville Tunnel. They reported hearing rhythmic knocking sounds on trees well after midnight, followed by a chilling silence that seemed to press against their tents. When one of them peeked outside, he saw a massive silhouette standing near the creek, its tall frame illuminated faintly by moonlight. The creature stood motionless for several seconds before slipping into the woods without a sound. The hunters broke camp at first light, unwilling to remain another night. A hiker on the backpack trail experienced a moment that left him questioning reality. While resting near an overlook, he heard deep breathing behind him, slow, heavy, and unnervingly close. When he turned around, he saw a towering figure partially hidden behind a cluster of oaks. The creature did not move, but the weight of its stare rooted him in place. After what felt like an eternity, it stepped backward into the shadows, its massive form blending seamlessly with the forest. The hiker left the trail and never returned alone again. Another chilling encounter occurred near an old cemetery deep within the forest. A pair of friends exploring the site heard footsteps approaching from the woods surrounding the graves. When they shined their flashlight toward the sound, they saw two amber eyes reflecting back at them from well above human height. The creature exhaled loudly, its breath visible in the cold air. The friends backed away slowly until the eyes disappeared. They later said the moment felt like a warning, as though they had trespassed where they didn't belong. A family hiking near Lake Hope noticed strange disturbances along the shoreline. Large stones shifted out of place, claw-like scratches etched into tree trunks, and deep impressions in the mud. As they followed the trail, they heard something massive moving through the brush parallel to them. When the father stopped and listened, the creature stopped as well. It maintained a precise distance, shadowing their movements. Only when they reached a more populated area did the sounds fade. The family believes the creature was escorting them out of its territory. A park volunteer recounted hearing haunting whoops echoing across the hills during a cleanup project. At first, she thought the sounds were human, but the rhythm and pitch were unlike anything she had heard before. As she listened, a second series of whoops responded from a distant ridge. The exchange grew louder, more urgent, until she felt the ground tremble faintly beneath her boots. She left the area immediately, convinced she was standing between two enormous beings communicating across the forest. A man camping alone near a remote section of the forest had a terrifying encounter when he awoke to the sound of heavy breathing outside his tent. He grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the noise, expecting to see a deer. Instead, he saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him from just beyond the tree line. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. Too afraid to move, the man waited inside the tent until sunrise. When he finally stepped out, he found massive footprints circling his campsite. Another witness reported seeing a towering figure walking across an overgrown logging road. He was surveying the area for work when he spotted the creature striding effortlessly through thick brush. The figure's movements were smooth and purposeful, unlike any animal he had ever seen. When he called out instinctively, the creature stopped and turned its head slightly, acknowledging him. After a long moment, it continued walking, disappearing into the dense forest as though it had never been there. The man left the area, shaken by the intelligence he sensed. Near the historic mining ruins, a group of students documenting old structures experienced an encounter they still refused to discuss publicly. They heard loud, snapping branches from a nearby hillside and assumed a large animal was approaching. But when they saw the silhouette standing among the ruins, tall, broad, and eerily still, they realized they were in the presence of something far larger than a bear. The creature remained silent, observing them until they retreated. They later admitted they felt like intruders trespassing on sacred ground. A photographer capturing autumn foliage along the forest's ridges saw something remarkable through his telephoto lens. In the distance, he spotted a large figure moving along the edge of a clearing, its stride impossibly long. The creature stopped beside a fallen tree, examining it with what looked like deliberate curiosity. When the photographer zoomed in further, the creature turned its head abruptly as though sensing the attention. A moment later, it stepped into the forest and vanished. The photographer left the area quickly, his nerves rattled. A naturalist studying salamander populations near a creek had an encounter that left her shaken. As she knelt by the water, she heard deep splashes upstream. Expecting deer, she looked up and saw a massive figure standing waist-deep in the creek. The creature stared at her with calm intensity, making no attempt to hide. She froze, terrified yet mesmerized by its presence. After several long moments, the creature turned and walked into the forest with slow, powerful strides. She reported the encounter quietly, unsure if anyone would believe her. The more I explored Zaleski, the more I felt the unmistakable presence of something ancient guarding the forest. The stories all pointed to a being that moved silently, observed carefully, and enforced invisible boundaries across miles of wilderness. As I hiked back toward my car at dusk, the woods fell silent, the air thick. Tar Hollow State Park is one of the most rugged, densely wooded regions in Ohio, a labyrinth of ridges, hollows, and shadowed ravines where sound carries in strange, unpredictable ways. Locals claim the forest listens, repeating footsteps, mimicking voices, and amplifying distant knocks until they echo like messages across the hills. As I interviewed hikers and rangers, a pattern emerged. Encounters often involved a towering figure observing quietly from the edge of sight. The deeper I traveled into Tar Hollow, the more I felt as though something ancient had claimed the forest long before humans ever set foot there. A pair of hikers exploring the Logan Trail reported hearing footsteps following them for over a mile. Each time they stopped, the footsteps stopped too. When they resumed walking, the sound continued from the dense brush beside the trail, slow, heavy, and synchronized. Eventually, one of them shined a flashlight into the trees and caught a glimpse of a massive silhouette standing perfectly still. The creature's eyes reflected the light with an amber glow, watching without approaching. The hikers turned back immediately, feeling the forest itself urging them to leave. One chilling account came from a father and daughter camping near the fire tower. Late at night, they heard distinct knocking sounds echoing from the ridge. The knocks grew louder, more rhythmic, until they seemed to encircle the campsite. When the father stepped out of the tent, he saw a tall figure standing near the tree line, illuminated faintly by moonlight. The creature remained motionless, observing them with deliberate stillness. Only when he retreated into the tent did the knocking stop, replaced by an eerie silence that lasted until dawn. A bow hunter deep in the forest had an encounter that left him shaken for months. While tracking deer at dawn, he heard a low, guttural hum resonate through the trees. As he scanned the forest floor, he saw a massive figure crouched behind a fallen log, its broad shoulders rising and falling with heavy breaths. When the creature stood, it towered above the underbrush, its silhouette unmistakably upright. The bow hunter froze, overwhelmed by the creature's presence. After several tense seconds, it stepped backward and vanished into the dense vegetation with uncanny grace. A group of friends hiking the Buckeye Trail experienced a terrifying moment when the forest suddenly went silent. No birds, no insects, no wind through the leaves. Moments later, they heard a deep whooping call from the hollow below them. The sound was powerful enough to vibrate in their chests. When they looked down, they saw a tall figure moving through the trees with long, purposeful strides. The creature never looked up, but its size and confidence left the group speechless. They left the trail early, unwilling to continue deeper into the woods. Another witness, a wildlife biologist, described an encounter near a remote wetland. While studying amphibians, she noticed large ripples spreading across the water as though something heavy had stepped into the shallows. When she raised her headlamp, she saw a towering silhouette standing on the opposite bank. The creature remained motionless, its eyes reflecting the light with an eerie glow. After several moments, it turned away, disappearing between the trees with a smooth, fluid movement that felt disturbingly intentional. A mountain biker racing along a narrow ridge saw something massive move parallel to him through the forest. No matter how fast he pedaled, the figure kept pace effortlessly, weaving between trees with astonishing speed. When he stopped to catch his breath, the creature stopped too, standing just beyond the ridge. He could hear its heavy breathing, steady and controlled. Terrified, he rode back the way he came, sensing that the creature could have closed the distance at any moment if it chose to. Near the historic CCC camp, a pair of night hikers encountered something that made them abandon the trail for good. They heard loud snapping branches nearby and saw a dark shape emerging from behind a cluster of pines. The figure stood upright and impossibly tall, its broad frame outlined by faint moonlight. When one of the hikers whispered in fear, the creature tilted its head slightly, as though trying to understand them. Without warning, it retreated into the darkness, leaving behind a crushing silence. The hikers left immediately, too afraid to look back. A woman walking her dog on a quiet morning reported seeing something unusual near a steep ridge. Her dog stopped abruptly, growling toward the trees. Moments later, a massive figure stepped between two oaks, its presence so overwhelming that the dog whimpered and backed behind her. The creature didn't move closer, it simply stood, observing. Its posture suggested intelligence rather than aggression. After a few moments, it turned away and vanished into the forest, leaving the woman trembling but unharmed. Another ranger reported hearing strange vocalizations near the Pine Run area. The sounds were deep, resonant, and spaced with a rhythm that seemed intentional. When he approached the source, he saw a large figure standing partially hidden in the brush. The creature's eyes reflected the beam of his flashlight, but it didn't flee. Instead, it slowly stepped backward, blending with the shadows until it was gone. The ranger said he felt like the creature was warning him not to pursue it. A group of students conducting field research near a stream experienced one of the most dramatic encounters. They heard something large wading through the water upstream. When they turned on their flashlights, they saw a massive silhouette standing knee-deep in the creek, watching them silently. The creature's breath was visible in the cold air, rising in slow clouds. After several tense moments, it stepped out of the water and vanished into the thick brush, leaving the students frozen with shock. The deeper I traveled into Tar Hollow, the more I realized that the forest's legends held truth. Something powerful and ancient moved through the ravines, watching, listening, and enforcing its own boundaries with calculated precision. As I walked back toward the trailhead at dusk, the woods grew still, and I felt eyes following my every step. A quiet message echoed in the silence: "You are only a guest here." And for the first time, I understood that this forest belonged to something far older than any human claim. Shawnee State Forest, often called the Little Smokies of Ohio, is a vast wilderness of steep hills, silent ravines, and deep pine thickets that swallow sound with unsettling ease. Locals claim the forest holds secrets far older than the park itself: strange calls echoing at night, shadowy figures trailing hikers, and heavy footsteps pacing campsites until dawn. As I ventured deeper into the backcountry, I felt an unusual weight in the air, as though the forest was hiding something enormous. Every witness I interviewed described the same sense of being watched, evaluated, and sometimes escorted out of areas rarely visited by humans. One of the most chilling accounts came from a hunter who was tracking deer near a remote ridge. He noticed a musky odor drifting through the air, earthy, pungent, and unmistakably animalistic. Moments later, he heard heavy footfalls behind him, spaced far apart like those of a massive biped. When he turned, he saw a towering silhouette standing among the pines, its broad shoulders blending into the shadows. The creature didn't move, but its presence radiated a quiet dominance. The hunter left the area immediately, sensing he had crossed an unspoken boundary. Two hikers on the wilderness trail reported an encounter that left them shaken. As they climbed a ridge, they heard deep vocalizations echoing across the valley, whoops, grunts, and something resembling a long, rising howl. When they reached the top, they saw a massive figure standing on the opposite ridge, silhouetted against the fading light. The creature raised its head, appearing to survey the land below. When one of the hikers snapped a twig, the figure turned sharply toward them. They fled down the trail without looking back. A family camping near Bear Lake had a terrifying experience late at night. Their campsite was surrounded by dense pine trees, and shortly after midnight, they heard heavy breathing from the darkness. Then came the sound of large stones being thrown, landing just beyond the firelight with thuds that rattled their nerves. When the father stepped outside to investigate, he saw a tall figure standing between the pines. The creature slowly stepped backward into the woods, watching the family with unblinking intensity. They packed up before sunrise, too frightened to remain another moment. A ranger performing routine maintenance near a remote firebreak encountered something that defied explanation. He heard powerful footsteps approaching through the brush, each step accompanied by a low, rumbling growl. When he aimed his flashlight toward the noise, he saw two glowing eyes reflecting the beam from a height far above human stature. The creature didn't charge or retreat, it simply watched him with a stillness that felt unnervingly calculated. After several moments, it slipped into the trees, leaving the ranger shaken and unsettled. A botanist surveying rare plant populations near a swampy section of the forest reported hearing strange rhythmic knocking sounds. She assumed it was another researcher working nearby, until the knocks changed pitch and moved across the swamp with deliberate timing. When she turned her head, she saw a massive dark shape moving between the reeds. The creature walked upright, its strides long and fluid. She froze, watching as it disappeared behind a cluster of trees. The botanist later said the encounter felt less like a threat and more like a warning to leave the area. A man exploring an old logging road at dusk experienced a moment he cannot forget. He heard branches snapping in the distance, followed by the sound of something breathing heavily. When he shined his flashlight toward the noise, he caught a glimpse of a large figure standing among the pines. The creature's eyes reflected the light with an eerie amber glow. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the creature was silently urging him to turn around. He did, and walked back to his vehicle without once looking over his shoulder. A group of night hikers conducting a stargazing trip had an unsettling experience on a ridge overlooking the forest. As they prepared their gear, they heard low whoops echoing from the valley below. At first, they dismissed the sounds as animals. But when the whoops grew louder and more coordinated, they realized the forest was responding in multiple locations. Then they saw a tall silhouette standing at the edge of the ridge. The creature remained still, its presence commanding. The hikers collected their equipment and left immediately. A kayaker exploring the quiet inlets of Turkey Creek at dawn noticed unusual ripples spreading across the water. He watched as a massive figure emerged from the brush and stepped into the shallows, wading through the water with smooth, deliberate movements. The creature paused in the middle of the creek, its breath visible in the morning air. When the kayaker shifted his paddle, the creature turned its head, watching him with intense curiosity. Moments later, it stepped back into the forest and vanished. A father and son hiking near the Twin Valley Trail reported hearing a deep growl that echoed through the hollow. The sound was powerful enough to vibrate their chests. When they turned around, they saw a tall figure standing behind a cluster of trees. The creature didn't approach, but it raised its head as though sniffing the air. The father grabbed his son and slowly backed away. They left the forest without finishing their hike, shaken by the creature's sheer size. A woman walking her dog in a quiet section of the forest described an encounter that continues to haunt her. Her dog stopped abruptly, whining and refusing to move forward. When she looked ahead, she saw a massive silhouette stepping between the pines. The creature's posture was calm, almost curious, but its presence was overwhelming. The dog trembled, and the woman felt a powerful instinct to retreat. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes on the figure until it merged with the shadows. Shawnee's dense pines and remote ridges create the perfect environment for something enormous, intelligent, and territorial to remain hidden. The stories all point to a creature that watches from the shadows, moves with eerie silence, and communicates through knocks and calls that echo across miles of wilderness. As I left the forest near dusk, the air grew heavy and still. I felt eyes on me, silent, ancient, and measuring. In that moment, I understood that whatever roams Shawnee chooses who may pass through its realm and who must turn back. Huron National Forest stretches across vast, quiet tracts of woodland where pine needles soften every footstep and fog settles low across the valleys. Though technically in Michigan, many Ohio travelers and hunters frequent the region, bringing back unsettling stories that mirror the encounters across Ohio's parks. I included these accounts because witnesses describe a creature identical in behavior, size, and presence, suggesting a shared migratory path across the Great Lakes region. The deeper I explored the forest's trails, the more I understood why so many people returned from Huron convinced they were being tracked by something impossibly large and disturbingly quiet. One of the earliest reports came from a bow hunter who camped near a remote section of the Osable River. Late at night, he heard footsteps circling his camp, slow, deliberate, and heavy enough to shake loose pine needles from branches above. When he peeked outside his tent, he saw a towering silhouette standing beside a large pine. The creature tilted its head as though examining him. It didn't approach, but its stillness radiated an unsettling dominance. The hunter packed up at dawn and left the forest without finishing his trip. A woman hiking alone along the Highbanks Trail encountered something that froze her in place. She noticed strange prints on the trail, massive, deep, and spaced far apart. As she followed them cautiously, she heard rhythmic knocking echoes through the trees. Moments later, a dark figure moved between the pines ahead of her, tall and broad-shouldered. The creature stopped briefly, its breath visible in the cold air, then turned into the woods with fluid movements. She felt watched the entire walk back to her car. A fisherman on the Osable canoe route had an encounter that left him speechless. As he paddled through a narrow, secluded channel, he heard splashes behind him, too heavy to be fish or deer. When he glanced back, he saw a large figure wading through the water with powerful, deliberate strides. The creature didn't chase him, instead, it watched calmly as he drifted away. The fisherman said its posture felt more curious than threatening, but the sheer size of it made his blood run cold. A pair of campers near the Whiskey Creek area described a terrifying night when they heard stones being thrown into the woods around them. At first, they thought it was pranksters. But when one stone landed near their fire pit, large enough to require 2 hands to lift, they realized something far stronger was nearby. Heavy breathing followed, coming from just beyond the light. The creature never stepped closer, but its presence dominated the campsite. The campers left before sunrise, convinced they had trespassed into something's home. A ranger conducting a wildlife survey heard guttural vocalizations echoing across the forest one early morning. The sounds were deep and resonant, unlike any known species in the area. As he approached the source, he saw a massive dark shape move quickly between the trees. The creature paused briefly, glancing in his direction, its eyes reflecting an eerie golden shine. Then it vanished with startling speed. The ranger later said the encounter felt intentional, as if the creature wanted to be seen, but only for a moment. A family hiking along a quiet forest road experienced a disturbing moment of silence. Birds stopped singing, and the air grew unnaturally still. Their dog began growling, staring into the dense brush. When the father looked closely, he saw a dark figure standing between the pines, motionless and watching. The creature didn't advance, but its presence felt heavy and undeniable. The family turned around immediately, with the sensation of being tracked the entire walk back. A mountain biker riding the forest's more isolated trails found himself shadowed by something large moving parallel to him. Each time he sped up, the creature matched his pace effortlessly. When he stopped, the footsteps stopped. He briefly glimpsed a towering silhouette through the trees, broad, upright, and shockingly fast. After that, he rode straight out of the forest, never returning to that trail. He said the creature's movements were too coordinated, too controlled to be any animal he knew. A hunter setting up a tree stand before dawn felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. As he climbed, he heard slow, heavy breathing from the darkness below. When he shined his flashlight down, he saw two bright eyes reflecting back from a height too tall to be a deer. The creature stood upright, partially shielded by brush. When he aimed the light directly at it, the creature turned away and slipped into the forest silently. The hunter left the forest immediately, shaken by how close the creature had stood. A naturalist recording owl calls late at night described hearing a strange mimicry echo through the woods, calls that sounded almost human but carried a haunting resonance. When she followed the sounds deeper into the forest, she saw a tall figure moving through the trees with slow, deliberate steps. The creature paused, tilted its head as if listening to her breathing, then continued walking with unnerving calmness. She backed away slowly, feeling as though the creature had allowed her to see it. Another chilling account came from a pair of hikers who spent the night in a backcountry shelter. Just after midnight, they heard loud footsteps approaching the cabin. The creature circled the structure several times, brushing against the wooden walls. When the hikers peeked through a gap in the boards, they saw a towering form standing just beyond the clearing. Its breath formed visible clouds that drifted into the moonlight. The creature eventually walked away, leaving them awake and trembling until dawn. All the stories from Huron point to the same conclusion: a massive, intelligent being roams the forest, silent when it chooses, loud when it wants to communicate, and always aware of human presence. It doesn't attack, but it enforces boundaries with frightening clarity. As I left the trailhead near dusk, the woods grew cold and still. I felt unseen eyes following me, tracking each step until I reached my car. In that moment, I understood why so many returned from Huron convinced they had encountered something that did not merely exist in the forest, it ruled it. Nelson Kennedy Ledges is known for its dramatic rock formations, narrow passageways, and sudden drops that make even experienced hikers tread carefully. But beneath its natural beauty lies a reputation for eerie encounters, strange knocks echoing through the stone corridors, heavy footsteps pacing along ridges, and glowing eyes watching from the shadows. Locals whisper that something ancient roams the labyrinth of ledges, using the dense fog that often blankets the forest as a veil. As I walked through the twisting rock passages, I felt the unmistakable sensation of being monitored with quiet, deliberate intelligence. One of the most unnerving sightings came from a college student who wandered off-trail at dusk. As he made his way through a narrow rock passage, he heard deep, rhythmic breathing echo between the stone walls. When he turned, he saw a towering silhouette at the passage entrance. The creature stood completely still, its presence filling the corridor with an oppressive weight. As the fog drifted in, the figure seemed to dissolve into it. The student didn't look back as he ran, certain the creature had allowed him to escape. A pair of friends hiking near Devil's Icebox reported hearing footsteps that mirrored their movements, slow, heavy, and precise. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. When they whispered, a low hum responded from the shadows. They shined their flashlights into the rock crevices, illuminating only darkness. Then they saw a massive figure shift between two boulders, its broad frame blending with the stone. The creature's eyes reflected their light with a faint golden glow before it stepped out of sight. A park volunteer clearing debris along a trail had an encounter that left him shaken. He was working alone when he heard a deep knocking sound coming from inside a narrow rock slit. When he approached cautiously, he saw a large shadow move deeper into the crevice. The creature exhaled loudly, and the warm breath rolled out like mist. The volunteer backed away, feeling certain the creature was intentionally hiding rather than retreating. He left the area and refused to return without company. Two hikers exploring the uneven terrain near the Sphinx Head Formation noticed strange prints in the damp soil. The footprints were enormous, with clear toe impressions and a stride far larger than any human's. As they examined the tracks, they heard a loud crack from the woods behind them. Turning around, they saw a massive figure step briefly into view, its silhouette framed against the fog. The creature raised its head, sniffing the air, then vanished into the trees with surprising grace. A woman walking her dog early in the morning described a chilling experience. Her dog froze suddenly, staring at a cluster of rocks with its tail tucked tightly. When she looked closer, she saw two glowing eyes reflecting the pale morning light from deep within a narrow fissure. The creature inside didn't move, but its presence radiated unsettling calmness. She backed away slowly, the dog whining as they retreated toward the main trail. When she looked back, the eyes were gone. A photographer setting up for night shots near the ledges heard something moving behind him, slow, heavy, and deliberate. He assumed it was deer until he saw a massive shadow rise behind a boulder. The creature stood upright, its silhouette towering and unmistakably humanoid. When the photographer reached for his camera, the creature tilted its head slightly, as though analyzing his intentions. It then stepped backward into the fog, leaving behind only faint traces of movement in the mist. A man camping illegally near the ledges claimed that something circled his campsite for hours. He heard breathing, soft but heavy, moving from one side of the clearing to the other. At one point, his fire flickered as if disturbed by a sudden gust of warm air. When he shined his flashlight toward the trees, he caught a glimpse of a tall figure standing near the edge of the clearing. The creature remained still, watching him until he retreated into his tent. He packed up before sunrise, shaken by the encounter. A group of teen hikers exploring after dark experienced one of the most terrifying encounters reported in the area. They heard loud whoops echoing across the stone formations, followed by a deep rumble that vibrated through the ground. When they turned their lights toward the sound, they saw a massive silhouette standing on a ledge above them. The creature raised its long arms slowly, releasing a guttural roar that echoed through the narrow passages. The teens fled, convinced they had intruded on something territorial. A naturalist studying mosses along the shaded ledges noticed an unusual silence in the forest, a silence so complete she stopped walking. Moments later, she saw a shadow move behind a narrow rock column. When she stepped forward, she saw a tall figure peer at her from behind the stone, its eyes reflecting a soft amber light. The creature's posture was calm, almost curious, but its presence radiated an unmistakable authority. She backed away respectfully, sensing she had stepped into forbidden ground. One man exploring the labyrinth-like crevices at dusk reported an encounter that changed the way he viewed the forest. He crawled through a narrow rock gap and emerged into a small clearing surrounded by towering stone walls. As he stood, brushing dirt from his hands, he heard a heavy inhale behind him. Turning slowly, he saw a massive figure standing in the shadowed corner of the clearing. The creature didn't move, didn't even flinch. It simply watched him with silent intensity. He walked away slowly, feeling the creature's eyes on him until he disappeared from the clearing. A ranger making rounds at sunset witnessed something he still struggles to explain. As fog rolled in from the trees, he saw a tall, broad silhouette standing atop a rock formation. The creature's outline was sharp against the dim sky, its posture perfectly upright. When he called out, the figure turned its head, acknowledging him. Then, with a single powerful step, it vanished behind the boulders as though absorbed by the fog itself. The ranger later said the creature moved with purpose, as if guarding the ledges. All the testimonies gathered from Nelson Kennedy ledges point to a creature that navigated. After traveling through Ohio's parks and forests, interviewing witnesses, and standing in the very places where countless encounters occurred, one truth became impossible to ignore: something vast, intelligent, and ancient moves through these landscapes. Whether in the deep ravines of Tar Hollow, the rugged ridges of Shawnee, or the fog-covered ledges of Nelson Kennedy, the creature's presence feels unmistakably real to those who meet it. Each park holds its own stories, yet the patterns remain the same: heavy footsteps, rhythmic knocks, glowing eyes, and a silent evaluation from the shadows. Whatever this being is, it does not wander aimlessly. People who encounter the creature describe not just fear, but a profound sense of being watched by something that understands them. Witnesses say the creature doesn't behave like a wild animal. It moves with purpose, maintaining distance, respecting boundaries, and enforcing its own. It communicates through calls, knocks, and presence, as though marking territory or warning intruders. The consistency of these behaviors across different parks suggests intelligence, perhaps even a system that humans have yet to recognize or interpret. What struck me most was how many encounters felt more like tests than threats. A hunter described being observed in silence. A hiker felt shadowed but never attacked. Families sensed a guiding presence that followed them only long enough to ensure they left dangerous areas. These patterns hint at a creature that chooses when to reveal itself and when to stay hidden. It seems driven not by rage or hunger, but by instinct, territoriality, and a complex awareness that we barely understand. In many cases, it behaved more like a guardian than a predator. Yet there is no denying the raw power behind its presence. Massive footprints pressed deep into mud, stones thrown with terrifying force, and roars that shake through valleys reveal a being capable of overwhelming any human who comes too close. Rangers, biologists, and experienced outdoorsmen, all trained to identify wildlife, describe moments when their instincts screamed that something far larger than a bear stood nearby. Its ability to move silently despite its size only intensifies the fear it inspires. This duality, calm intelligence and raw strength, defines the creature's legend. Across every forest, witnesses reported the same chilling sensation, the feeling of being evaluated. It wasn't random curiosity. It was precise, deliberate, and powerful. Whether through glowing eyes watching from behind trees or the quiet pacing along narrow ridges, the creature seemed to judge whether people were a threat. Some were allowed to pass untouched. Others were warned away. In rare cases, the creature made itself fully visible, standing tall as if declaring ownership of the land it roamed. One ranger confided that he believes the creature sees deeper into human intentions than we understand. He said its reaction changed depending on whether a person walked confidently or fearfully, respectfully or recklessly. Witnesses who panicked, screamed, or intruded too deeply into secluded areas often encountered louder sounds, more aggressive warnings. Those who remained calm sometimes reported seeing the creature watch them with what felt like curiosity rather than hostility. This suggests a level of awareness far beyond that of ordinary wildlife. What if these creatures have always been here, long before state boundaries, hiking trails, and campgrounds marked the land? Indigenous stories across the region hint at towering guardians, watchers, and shadowed beings that lived in harmony with the forests. These legends describe creatures that observed humans, protected sacred places, and punished those who disrespected the land. The uncanny similarities between these ancient stories and modern encounters cannot be overlooked. Perhaps we are not discovering something new, only rediscovering what older cultures already understood. As technology advances and trails expand deeper into remote areas, reports have only increased. Thermal cameras capture fleeting heat signatures. Hikers record strange whoops echoing across valleys. Drone footage reveals shadows far larger than any known animal. Yet nothing definitive emerges. Every piece of evidence raises new questions, as though the creature intentionally avoids leaving proof. It seems to understand human curiosity, and counters it with silence, distance, and perfect timing. Despite the fear these encounters inspire, very few suggest intentional aggression. Most reports describe the creature as a watcher, not a hunter. Even when it throws stones or approaches campsites, the actions appear more like warnings than attacks. It pushes people out of areas it wants undisturbed. It circles campsites but rarely enters them. And it mimics sounds as though trying to communicate or assess reactions. This behavior suggests an ancient intelligence shaped by survival, territory, and observation, not malice. As night falls in these forests, the creature becomes bolder. Witnesses describe glowing eyes appearing between pines, heavy breathing from behind boulders, and silhouettes watching from ridges. Fog becomes its ally, masking its movements while allowing it to remain unseen. Those who walk alone at dusk often report the same sensation, the undeniable feeling that something enormous keeps pace with them, just out of sight. Whether it chooses to reveal itself depends on forces we still don't understand. The more stories I collected, the more I realized that Ohio's forests share a single narrative thread: humans are not alone in these woods. Something ancient roams the ravines, ridges, and riverbanks, something that has adapted to survive in the deepest shadows. It observes us with patience, perhaps curiosity, and absolutely with control. Its presence is neither random nor accidental. It moves with purpose through territories it has claimed for generations. The wilderness belongs to it far more than it belongs to us. As I left the last forest at dusk, the trees swayed gently in a wind I could not feel. The silence pressed in around me, heavy and knowing. I felt eyes on me, steady, calm, and unblinking, until I reached the safety of the trailhead lights. I realized then that the creature had allowed me to walk its land, to collect its stories, and to leave untouched. And in that moment, I understood the unspoken truth behind every encounter: we are visitors, and the forests belong to the watcher.